don't cut into the wobble, cut across the wobble. Okay? So if it's wobbling sideways and there's unevenness on the side, the temptation is to get the wheel going and to come in from the side to try and even it up.
Right.
It never works because it's very, very difficult / impossible to hold your tool steady enough and strongly enough so that as it wobbles out, you just take a slice off of the high point and then leave the low point and leave the rest. The wobbling clay will wobble your tool, and yes, you'll be able to reduce the Rocky Mountains to the Appalachians, but it's still a mountain range even though it's rounded. So you'll have a more even but still wobble. So what you do is you cut across the wobble. So the first thing you want to even this guy off, both on the sides and the top. So you can do either one, doesn't matter which one you do first. I tend to like to do even off the sides first and then even off the top. So what you do is, instead of coming in from the side, either end, your comfort thing, you come in far enough so that you can get a cut even on the part of the pot that wobbles in. So you can get a groove going all the way around, and then you just cut down across the wobble.
Okay, I got you.
You see?
Mm-hmm.
As long as you can get a cut all the way around, then the wobbling clay isn't going to kick your tool around, and you can just cut down. As it wobbles out, your cut gets fatter. As it wobbles in, your cut gets narrower, but you're cutting all the way around. So you cut off the unevenness by cutting across the unevenness. Okay? Now, this is not what we want ultimately, but it's even. Okay? So now, if we did want to, we can come in fact, in one of the next steps, we will come in from the side because it's not going to wobble us around. We could just cut into it. The top is the same thing. If it's uneven or if it's wobbling up and down because you didn't get a proper cut when you were cutting the pot off, don't try to come down on the top to nick off the high point and bring it down even with the low point. That again never works. It'll bounce your tool up and down. So what you do, instead of coming down from the top to even off the top, is you drop down on the side, get a little cut going all the way around, and then just slowly
Move it in.
work your way across the top like an old record player turntable arm, and then just take the top off all the way into the center. Now, this may not be absolutely flat, but it's the same all the way around. It may not be where you want it to be exactly, but it's absolutely even. Now that everything is even, we can actually cut what we want. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is cut in to form my foot.
That's beautiful. Joy, beautiful.
Yeah, that's your time. That's
Okay.
what you do.
Okay,
Late.
this foot is too high
I do like that. Do you want my
visually. Okay, so I can either make it a little narrower or I can make it lower. I think I'm going to make it lower. Again, now that it's even, I can just come down from the top.
Oh, that's
Cut
beautiful.
off the clay that I need.
Well, thank you. Oh,
Okay.
thank you, Beth. That's much better. Hands weren't cut.
That is beautiful.
Okay, so this foot is basically where I want that little ring to be now to support the. And see, now I've got this excess clay here, cut away. So now what I'm going to do, again, using either tool, doesn't matter. I'm going to cut away that little wedge of excess clay because I want the outside of the bowl to match the inside curve. Now the curve, because we felt it, we know that the curve inside and outside are even in this region here. And inside it continues up. So all I have to do is cut away this excess clay until I have what looks like an absolutely continuous curve. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And you can see how it's not continuous now. So all I have to do now is cut away this excess clay here
He was so sick. The funniest thing was,
until I have what feels like a continuous curve.
he was
Okay.
okay after.
So
What's the matter?
what you want to do is you want to set the thickness of the foot ring
Was it
drop.
like
Rule of thumb is that the thickness of the foot should be about what the thickness of the ring is
went
of the
down
pot,
the inch and
Oh,
a half,
okay.
plus a little bit.
but
Okay.
That's scary.
It's
when you
okay
feel
if
like
it's
you're choking
super
something.
fat,
Well, you didn't feel
but
like
you
he
don't
was
want it
choking.
super thin.
You could
But
still eat.
good rule of thumb is that the foot
but
thickness should be
just feel like
about
there's a
what the
slug
rim
in
thickness
there.
is. Okay, so I'm just going to like set where I think the foot ring is. Oh, incidentally, you want to make sure that the entire outside of your pot is finished and formed before you start cutting out
Oh,
the
that's
inside.
okay because I thought I was
Because
getting better.
if you start cutting out
And then
the
I went
inside
down to
and then
really
you
big
look at
sore
it
throat,
and you
but my
decide,
usual in
you
there.
know, the foot should be smaller.
I never heard of that.
Sorry.
Yeah.
You like it. You like it.
Too late.
Too late. So
Wow.
this is our last chance to make judgments of whether the foot is proper or
Oh, yeah. I read,
not before
you know,
we cut away
the
the inside.
internet
So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the corner of this tool and I'm just going to
I
set.
think every medical doctor hates the internet. Because we all look up and then,
A little bit.
you know, they list everything that could possibly be. And
Like that. So that's the thickness of the foot. Now what I want to do is I'm going to cut from here to the center, or I can cut from the center out to here, but I'm not going to cross that line. Okay?
yes, of course, she knew everything. Okay.
She knew everything about everything.
Who doesn't?
Everybody graduated from Yahoo University.
Yeah.
WebMD.
Yeah, WebMD. Actually, if you really
Now,
want to
the obvious
get to know
question
yourself, just tell
is,
somebody else about this. You have to go to
how do
PubMed
you know
about
how
that.
deep
What?
to go?
PubMed.
Because you can
PubMed.
easily cut
PubMed.
through the
Dot
bottom.
com.
Yeah.
And it's
There
it's
are
the,
some tricks which
it's
I
the
do
online
not
library for the
recommend.
National Institutes of
There's
Health
one
and
where you
NIH.
take a pin tool
get a
and you,
study on
I mean,
everything and
a
learn
push
about
pin,
it.
Really?
and you
Yeah,
push up
that's
from
what
the
I did for
inside.
research.
Over the
And then all you do
holidays,
is cut
my
until you hear tick, tick,
great
tick, and you're at the end. The problem with that is it
got
leaves a
sick,
little hole,
spread 104
and people
fever.
say, "Oh, don't worry
Oh,
about it. That
no.
hole
The next
fills up
week,
with glaze."
My brother and sister
Maybe
lived
yes,
maybe
maybe no. So
When
I
mother
don't
and
recommend.
Sarah came to
Okay,
pick her
but
up,
you've got basically the way you judge
said, "How
how
smells like
deeply to
maple
cut
syrup?"
is
and
you have a
she's
visual
13 months
cue
old. And Sarah goes,
and you
"What
have a
did you feed her?"
tactile cue, and between the
Nothing,
two
we
of
gave her
those,
a waffle
you'll
with no
know
syrup.
where you are. The visual cue is,
There's this
imagine
horrible
that this foot ring
syndrome,
is in
genetic
fact
recessive
a ring that we
Yeah.
stuck to the bottom of a nice
Ed
rounded
DuPont was
bowl.
basically useless.
If
except
we
doing
imagine taking this
blood
foot
tests
ring
they-
and pulling it
Sarah said
off,
send it to CHOP.
would we
course,
have
we all
an
did
absolutely even
Turns
curve?
out it's not
At
that
this
because
point,
that's serious.
no.
I mean, usually
You
it-
would see that there's still a lump of
it
clay
can present later.
there because you can visualize what
turns
this
out
curve
the guy
would
from
do
CHOP
as it came up
did
underneath the
extensive
foot
studies
and
and
came
consulted
out
with
under,
markets.
from the other side of the foot. And
It's
yes,
not.
it's going to be higher
just
than
something
this
that happens
because it's curving up,
when
but
there are
this is still
metabolic
too high. If we pulled off this foot, there'd be a step down. So that
But,
tells us visually
like,
that there's still
5
plenty
days,
of clay
we
to
were-
cut there. The other thing is tacking. What you do is you tap on the bottom, okay? And it's not the sound. It's not like tapping a watermelon to see if it's, a hollow sound and
Okay.
right. What you're looking for is a tactile feeling.
Oh.
What you're looking for is a friend of mine describes it as the feeling you have when you tap on a drum head. Okay?
Yes.
It doesn't sink, but there's a bit
feels
of a
right.
vibration.
Oh, okay.
Okay, it's the same feeling that you get, say, walking on a wooden stage as opposed to walking on a concrete sidewalk. Okay?
Okay.
There's a little bit, because wooden stages are suspended,
Yeah.
so there's a little bit of a bounce. It's not like you're on a trampoline, you don't
Right.
sink into it, but there's a sense of a little bit of a vibration, a bit of a bounce, and that's what you're looking for. If you tap on it and it feels really solid, if it feels like you're tapping, on something, you're too thick.
Right.
Okay? If you tap on it and you sink, you're already too thick.
Yeah.
Okay? So what we're going for is that little feeling of a bounce. So we got a little bit more to go. Again, since we know that the inside, from our memory, the inside is curved, the center is going to be higher than the outside. Because we want to have that curve in the pot. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to cut the outside of the bowl to mimic the inside.
Well, that's fun, but yeah. Sadistic, you don't have to go to mom.
You should ask, everybody should ask their dentist for tools that they're gonna throw away, which they do.
I have a
Get
whole
them for
set of,
farming?
I have a whole set of dental tools.
Really?
They're the best. For all little tiny kinds of things. My mom used to use it when she refinished furniture, because back in the day when you put that thick stuff on, she'd be able to get into all the little nooks and crannies of like a press chair or whatever. But that's because my dad was a dentist, so.
So I have an infinite supply of old, used, worn out dental tools.
Yeah, good point, Dora. Purpose. Yeah, that's the word. We need our stuff.
Don't you have enough?
Okay, so now if you look at it, you can see that if this is a foot ring and we
Right.
pulled it off, it looks like it's kind of continuous. You see that?
Yep.
And also, when we tap on it, there's a little bit of a vibration. Let me cut a little bit more right in the center. It's a little
Oh,
thick
yes,
right
I
in
do.
the center, but you'll see what I mean.
Yes. Yes. Yes, it has to take over the supply of the hormones to maintain the pregnancy.
Go ahead.
They have to
You
alternate.
can tap on it pretty hard. You see that? There's a little bit of a sense of a bounce back.
Yep.
Okay, that's where you go. Okay, one last thing, well, a couple of last things before we pop this guy off. The cut edges on the foot are, when they're fired, really sharp.
Oh, okay.
So what you want to do is you want to slightly soften them. So you take a finger and you just soften that inside edge, just so that it's not absolutely sharp. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take your tool and we're going to cut a tiny little bit of a 45-degree angle bevel right at that outside edge and soften that. And I'll show you why that bevel in a second. This is a little thin, by the way. When I was cutting that, I got a little bit carried away. Okay, oh, the last thing, I don't do this, which is why I always forget it, but the cut surface, you see how there are little sandy particles
Yeah,
in it?
yeah.
That's called grog. Many clays have, it's pre-fired clay, which is pounded up to a sand-like consistency and then added to the clay body. It helps to minimize shrinkage of the clay in the drying and firing. It also helps minimize cracking because it stops whatever, it sort of stops cracks from propagating when it hits one of those little
Okay.
pieces of grog. So When you cut it, it brings the grog, it shows the grog. When you're throwing, that stuff gets mushed into the clay surface so you don't see it. But when you cut it, you end up seeing that grog. When you go to glaze the pot, you'll get tiny little pinholes down here in the glaze because of the grog.
Okay.
Me, that never bothers me, so I don't do this, but if that bothers you or you want a smoother surface, this is how you do it. You take a metal rib, and after you've cut everything, you just kind of polish the cut surface. And what that does is pushes the grog back down into the surface, smooths the surface, and then when you go to glaze, you won't have those pinholes.
Are you done with my rib?
And then you just peel this stuff away.
And now this, because this is different, this just is not gonna.
And that's not going to be different in the firing. No. It's just compressed.
Yeah.
Okay? And there we are. And let me show you why that little bevel on top. If you set this guy down on a surface, you see how you get a little black shadow line at the very bottom because of that bevel? That little black shadow line visually cuts the pot loose from the surface, and it makes the pot seem lighter and more elegant. It's a tiny, tiny, tiny little touch, but it does make a difference. It's an old potter's trick or technique, but it does make a difference. It takes 30 seconds or less to do, might as well do it. You can do the same thing by slightly rounding that outer edge, but what you were looking for is a little break right at the bottom edge so that you get that black shadow line. It's a nice little thing. And then just sign your pot, and then it goes over here to be dry, to bone dry, and visified.
It'll take my